All right. Welcome back, Wolfpack. This is Fox Revies here. We are doing another Kyle Rittenhouse trial update. I realize the titles are the same as yesterday and that they are incorrect. They're incorrectly stating that this is day 4 and 5. However, we are doing day 5 continued and into day 6. Fear not. Not much I can do about the titles. We might be able to change it in post, but it's okay. Alrighty, so what happened at the end of day 5? So we where we last left off yesterday, which was a very long stream, and hopefully today will be a little bit shorter, though that remains to be seen. Where we left off yesterday was after the testimony of Gage Grosswick, who is the lone testifying survivor of Kyle's self-defense incidents. We spent a lot of time on his testimony because that was basically the state prosecutor's star witness. If the jury was going to feel bad for somebody, Gage was going to kind of be the face of the people that Kyle killed that night. And so we spent a lot of time on that. That was a very long testimony in time, and then we also spent a lot of time covering it. After Gage went off the stand yesterday, there was some more testimony to finish off day 5. So after Gage, we had the state called Heather something. I missed her last name. She is a member of the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. She is a firearm toolmark examiner, and she is the person who inspected Kyle's rifle and the bullet casings to determine whether or not they came from Kyle's rifle. Pretty boilerplate stuff. It was kind of boring. Next, the state called Jason Krieger, who was another Kenosha police officer. He was working. He was presumably working on Tuesday night, the night of the shootings. He testified that, like the other police officers, he was, quote, on patrol, which basically meant that he wasn't doing anything. Again, we've talked about this multiple times. The police just abandoned the city to burn, and even though all the police officers are testifying that they were doing their job, that they were on patrol that night, it is evident from the anarchy and the fire of the city that they were not, in fact, actually doing their jobs that night. He testified that he was in the car that Kyle approached. We'd previously heard from another police officer who was also in that car that Kyle approached after shooting Gage. So this is where Kyle's trying to turn himself in at the police line. They end up turning him away. This is the police officer that pepper sprayed Kyle, and that's when Kyle walked away to the car source, the car lot that he was defending earlier in the night, and then eventually he'd be driven back to his home, the city next to Kenosha, and then he turned himself into the police department there 40 minutes later. This police officer is also an idiot. He testified that Kyle was holding an AR-15 style assault rifle. I don't know what an assault rifle is. To the best of my knowledge, it doesn't actually have a definition that fits what a gun is. And actually, in the current case is actually about whether or not Kyle's AR-15 was an assault rifle or a defense rifle. It is my opinion, and it is the opinion of Kyle's defense, that it was not, in fact, an assault rifle. It was a defense rifle. For instance, I have at least one, maybe more, knock on my door and find out AR-15s, and I consider them to be defense rifles, not assault rifles. So I don't know what an assault rifle is. I'm not sure why the police officer testified to a mythical device, but that was his testimony. The police officer also testified that he thought Kyle was a threat. When asked to clarify that Kyle had his hands up while approaching the vehicle, the officer said yes. Did you still consider him a threat? Yes. So I don't know why. This police officer, like his partner in the vehicle, also testified that Kyle did not follow any police commands. But the video that was played again for this police officer of Kyle approaching the car, or Kyle approaching the squad car, does not show Kyle disobeying any police orders. There was no police orders given except for get off the road, at which point Kyle gets off the road. So both of these police officers are testifying that Kyle was refusing to follow police orders. Like that's the wording that they used, and that's some pretty strong language when there's no video evidence. Even when played back to the police officers, they maintain that Kyle was not following police commands, but the video doesn't show that. This police officer also called Gage, Anthony, and Rosenbaum victims, which again is not currently known yet. This case is about whether or not they were victims or assailants. So this police officer, kind of assuming the pretense a little bit here, the premise rather. He's assuming the premise of the case here. He's assuming a conclusion to the case, which currently we don't know. I think we know, but the case right now is to determine: was Gage a victim? Was Anthony a victim? Was Rosenbaum a victim? Or were they all actually assailants? Was Kyle's rifle being used to assault them, or was it being used to defend Kyle? Those are all what is the question right now. That's all what's at question. And this police officer was presuming the answer, which is not correct. The defense cross-examined this police officer. That was uninteresting testimony. It kind of reconfirmed all the stuff that we had just heard from the direct examination. The state re-examined the same police officer, also uninteresting. The state then called Christian Harrison, who is a male, just because Christian's it can be a neutral name. So as a male, he was the person filming and live streaming for the YouTube channel Rundown Live. Rundown Live, their stream was one of the most republished live streams of that night in Kenosha. He was kind of all over the place and everywhere that Kyle was. And so his footage has been played for the court multiple times as multiple pieces of evidence already. And I certainly remember, I'm sure you do too, seeing the Rundown Live watermark on footage that we've watched throughout the last year. So he had some very well-positioned footage, and so the state brought him on to testify. In addition to his footage, what was he seeing and what was his kind of on-the-ground experience of what was going on that night. The filmer for the Rundown Live, Christian, he claimed to be neutral, but it was very evident in his video that he was shooting, that, you know, his camera in his hand and he's talking. You can hear him talking. While he was claiming to be neutral on the stand, you can see in the video that he was actively engaging with the rioters, defending the rioters, and quote-unquote attempting to defuse the situation when the rioters approached Kyle's group and was saying disparaging things to them, and a little bit of physical pushing and shoving. I think that this guy, I don't know much about him, but based off of what I can see in the video and based off of his testimony, kind of contradicting which side he was on in the moment. I'm guessing he's probably another activist journalist, one of those like live streamers who's probably more affiliated on the lefty side of things rather than on the I don't want to say that it's left versus right in this, right? Because it's the leftists versus the people who would prefer to not have their shit burned down. So I don't know if it's really fair to say that, like, oh, you know, he's not a conservative. Like, I don't care if he's not a conservative. It's just when you've got the left continuously trying to burn stuff down, especially when Kenosha happened. I mean, this was 4 months into the summer of love. At this point, as I said a few episodes ago here, by this point in the summer, August 24th of the summer of 2020, there had been something like 30 people murdered by Black Lives Matter and by Antifa at the riots over the course of 100 cities. Not to mention something like $4 to $8 billion worth of damage done. It's kind of a side note here, but the number often quoted for how much damage was done in 2020 is based off of what the insurance payouts were at something like $4 billion. But the insurance payouts didn't cover 100% of the damage. So the $4 billion is just what can be calculated. It's likely that the real number is probably at least double $4 billion, maybe more, because insurance doesn't always pay out for everything. And that was one of the continuous gripes of a lot of people was that, the city would allow the rioters to come in, burn their business to the ground, and the insurance company said, well, that sucks for you. We're not paying. Let's see here. So again, that's just to reiterate that this Christian guy appears to be a little bit biased. Not that really makes a difference at all. I just think he's lying when he says that he's neutral. He also testified that he had been at many other, he called them demonstrations, I call them riots throughout the summer, and that he was generally accepted by BLM and Antifa. We know for absolute certain that BLM and Antifa only accept people filming if BLM and Antifa like what that guy has to say. So it's not just neutral people that get to go film BLM. It's specifically people affiliated with BLM and Antifa that are allowed to film them. So him testifying that he's neutral, but him also testifying that he was accepted by these groups throughout the summer and that he followed them around to various cities, you can be pretty sure that he's an activist. The defense cross-examines him. Let's see here. You say... So Christian on camera, we watch the film and we can hear the audio. He says on camera to Kyle's group, this quote, this whole crowd could burn y'all alive. The defense asks, why would you say that to Kyle's group? Christian responds that he was attempting to de-escalate the situation because the rioters had gotten upset that Kyle's group had put out a dumpster fire. And so, again, whose side is this guy on? He's trying to de-escalate, and he's trying to de-escalate by yelling at the people putting out fires. I don't know if he was really a neutral observer. Also, he's at, the center of events. When things are going on, when there's conflict, he's literally, in the center of the group, not off to the side. He's just in the middle, and he's actively engaging in conversation. You can see that in all of his video clips. So, again, just to color that he may testify that he's neutral, but he clearly was not. The state then goes back to direct examination. The state tries to say, one of the things Christian had said narratively throughout his videoing when he's giving commentary live in the audio, Christian's continuously referring to Kyle's group as militia members. So the state asks, did you think that Kyle was militia because, he was wearing a green shirt? And basically they were just trying to imply that, wearing a green shirt suddenly converts you into militia. I guess I got a green shirt right here. Actually, I should put that on and I'll basically be, in the military because that's what green shirts mean. And if you remember the video, we've all seen the picture of Kyle. It's pretty, I think it's pretty well traveled what Kyle was wearing that night. Kyle's shirt wasn't even olive drab. It was not lime green, not neon green. It was just light green. But not all green is military or militia. The militia doesn't just get to own an entire color. Maybe specific shades in context, but the type of green that Kyle was wearing on his shirt, I don't think anyone would just see that shirt and immediately assume that was anything militant related. Now, if it was a more olive drab color, you might say, oh, okay, that's one of the standard shirts that military guys wear under their uniforms. It's just that olive t-shirt. But Kyle's shirt wasn't an olive t-shirt. It was just green. So the state's trying to make these weird connections. I don't know what's in the state's head, but the state prosecutors, but I just trying to imagine you're sitting down preparing for the trial and you're talking with your other lawyers and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going to make the jury think that Kyle was a danger that night? Oh, let's try and conflate that he was wearing a green t-shirt. Yeah, everybody thinks green just means the military. Yeah, I bet you if we harp on this t-shirt thing, I bet you will get the jury to believe that all people wearing green t-shirts are militia members and that made Kyle a danger. I just don't understand what they were. This is kind of the narrative of the entire case, right? It's just these really nitpicky logical fallacies, and that is all the state has. All the state has is these nitpicky logical fallacies that don't really go anywhere, and there's no substance to them. let's see here. The state asked Christian, the filmer for the Rundown Live. The state asks him, you were asked about who escalated the conflict. So in the video footage from Christian, you can see somebody from Kyle's group, not Kyle, yelling, fuck around, find out, as he's putting out a fire in the dumpster. The state's trying to indicate that this is a threat, to which I wrote down in my notes, nope, I don't think it was a threat. I think it was a promise. But the prosecutor, or the Kyle's defense kind of objects to this, saying like this other person may be making a threat at random rioters that are not even the people that Kyle shot. That has nothing to do with Kyle. Nothing to do with Kyle at all. So part of there's parts to claiming self-defense. So there's one of the key parts of self-defense is you cannot claim self-defense if you were the person that instigated a conflict with somebody else. So if you end up shooting somebody and you're trying to claim self-defense, if you're the person that started the argument that led to you having to shoot, you don't get to claim self-defense. So what the state was stupidly, idiotically trying to do here was to conflate that, well, since this other person who wasn't Kyle threatened people that Kyle didn't shoot, that means that Kyle doesn't get to claim self-defense because reasons and confusing the jury, I guess. I don't know. The judge sustains the objection from Kyle's defense. So again, Kyle's defense objects to this line of questioning because it's irrelevant. The judge agrees and says that it's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with Kyle. And the state tries to say, well, it goes to the to the group. This idea that the group was threatening the rioters. That's what we're trying to prove here. And the judge says, well, the group isn't on trial. Kyle's on trial. Which is obvious to anybody. I don't know what country Mr. Binger learned his law in. A name I haven't said at any point during this video series, and kind of intentionally, but there's some stuff that came up today that's going to make it more relevant. The lead lawyer on the state's prosecution is Mr. Binger. Mr. Binger. And now I've just been referring to him as the state or the state prosecutor just to, there's a lot of names going around, so it's better to give him a descriptor. But Mr. Banger, I don't know what state or country he learned law in, but we don't prosecute people as members of groups here. We prosecute individuals. And so it was really idiotic that he even thought that it was a valid line of argumentation to say, well, if I can prove the group was threatening, then that means Kyle was threatening, and therefore Kyle can't prove self-defense. The reason why Mr. Binger's name is going to become important, probably tomorrow's episode, is that late today, after I stopped watching at about 4 p.m. Eastern, between 4 p.m. Eastern and about 5 p.m. Eastern, which is when I started streaming, getting ready for stream here, during that hour, there was some kind of golden event that happened, me having caught a little bit of it on Twitter before I started streaming here. Apparently, Mr. Binger tried to coerce one of the witnesses prior to the trial. And from my understanding, based off what Twitter is reporting now, we'll go into this in detail tomorrow because I don't have the full facts right now. We'll go into detail tomorrow, I'm positive. But from my understanding, the last hour in real time of the case right now has basically been the state prosecutors trying to prove that they themselves didn't influence a witness or threaten a witness or try to coerce a witness into lying on the stand, which is, I mean, I didn't see the case. I knew that their case was collapsing, but I didn't think that their case was collapsing to the extent that they are now essentially defending themselves from a case of fraud or interfering with a trial, which is a pretty high crime if true. So I'm sure we will talk about that tomorrow, but that's going to go into a lot of a lot about Mr. Binger. So keep his name in mind when we talk about that tomorrow. So that was the end of day 4. Oh no, it wasn't. That was not the end of day 4. That was the end of. That wasn't even the end of day 5. Never mind. We're still on day 5. So, day 5 continues. They called. The state calls Detective Marini. This is the guy. Marini is the guy that is related to the Kenosha District Attorney. They share a last name, and he's also related to the mayor of Kenosha, who also shares his last name. Again, we've talked about. There's a little bit of a interesting. There's a possible conflict of interest in that the mayor of Kenosha, Mayor Marini, allowed the city to fall to anarchy, ordered the police to pull back, ordered the police to allow businesses to burn. And then the citizens of Kenosha that decided, well, I'd rather my business didn't burn, so I'm going to defend it. I would rather my business not burn because Mayor Marini declared it so. Those citizens are now being prosecuted by District Attorney Marini, and they're being investigated by Detective Marini. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. I think that once Kyle is acquitted, I think some of these people will be in trouble. I think that at the very least, they will be investigated slightly. There's certainly some funny business going on in the city of Kenosha. Detective Marini lied a lot. So when he was on stand, he said that the police, the night of the shooting, had the capacity to respond to 911 calls and to fire calls. This is total bullshit. He's testifying that on Tuesday night in Kenosha, after $2 million worth of car inventory just for CarSource, not to mention dozens of other buildings completely burned to the ground. Detective Marini is testifying that on Tuesday night still, the police had the capacity to respond to 911 calls and fire calls. That's completely ridiculous. And basically he was saying that because in his mind, he didn't really understand what the point of Kyle being out there was. He didn't understand why people were out defending their businesses. His testimony was there was no reason to defend your business. The police were able to respond to 911. They had the capacity. And the fire department was responding to fires, which is just not true at all. It's just absolutely not true at all. The evidence of it not being true is literally all of the video footage of everything burning to the ground and the police not responding to any of these incidents. That would be the proof. Detective Marini testified that on Tuesday night there were enough resources to respond to fires at CarSource, which is, it's funny because while the CarSource building was still standing on Tuesday night, all of their car inventory had been burned to the ground. So it's kind of funny that the state asked Detective Marini, like, did the police and fire have enough capacity to respond to CarSource on Tuesday night? Well, it didn't really matter because the night that they needed to respond to fires was the night before. There was not a ton left to burn on Tuesday night. There was a lot burning on Monday night that the fire department did not respond to. So, again, obviously not true. Obviously not true. Then Detective Marini starts getting more specific. Well, we would only respond to 911 calls if it involved a threat to life. Well, then you don't have the capacity to respond to 911 calls. Not all of them, at least. And apparently, not all fire is a threat to life, as per the cars that burned the night previously. So this basically just undermines his previous testimony that they had the capacity to respond to 911 and fire. Or perhaps it's true. Maybe they did have the capacity to respond to these things and they just chose not to because they're dicks, or because Detective Marini's uncle Mayor Marini told the police and fire to hold back. I don't know why, but it was pretty. He's a liar. He is a liar. And Detective Marini, he's got a lot of stuff going on here. All right. Detective Marini was the person who knew about the footage of Rosenbaum and Anthony Hubert grabbing, or at least reaching for, Kyle's rifle. Detective Marini had the chance to tell the officer who swabbed the barrel or swabbed the Kyle's rifle for DNA evidence, for touch evidence, to swab the barrel as well, and he chose not to do that. So we talked about this yesterday. There is a DNA analyst who received swabs from the magazine, the trigger, and the barrel shroud. Those all came back negative or inconclusive for Rosenbaum or Anthony touching the rifle, which there was a very funny incident where the DNA analyst was asked, is there evidence that is there DNA evidence that Anthony Hubert touched the rifle? No. Is this an image of Anthony Hubert touching the rifle? Yes. So I don't really know why there was DNA evidence in there anyways, but be that as it may, Detective Marini would have been in a position, being the lead detective on the case, he would have been in a position to realize, one of the accusations is that these people were touching the barrel, not the barrel shroud. Maybe that's the thing I should be swabbing for touch evidence. Basically, Marini is responsible for making sure that the only places the rifle was swabbed for DNA touch evidence were the places that specifically were not touched and never claimed to be touched by the people that were attacking Kyle. We then get to see, which was strange, and I'll pull it up here and show you guys. We then get to see what I've not seen this either, but apparently it's been out in the wild. We get to see, at least never before seen to me, drone footage. Not the FBI footage. So the FBI footage was taken from a manned fixed-wing aircraft, not a drone. And the type of drone I'm talking about is like the one that you'd hold in your hand and you'd go buy at Walmart, not like a military drone at all. So this is a civilian drone with a camera on it. I want to play the clip of the drone footage because now, again, like I said, this has supposedly been played before and it's been out in the wild, but I've never seen it before and I don't think it had very wide circulation. Let's see here. Yeah, so what you're seeing on screen right now is they're going to play it, which they're talking and doing stuff in the trial. There we go. So this drone just starts taking off. It immediately points at the parking lot. And who's in the parking lot? Oh, there's Kyle being chased by Rosenbaum. Kyle turns and shoots. And isn't it strange that this drone, 10 seconds before takeoff, or 10 seconds before this incident happens, the drone decides to take off. 5 seconds before this incident happens, the operator just happens to turn the camera and center directly, like where Kyle just shot Rosenbaum is perfectly in the center of the frame. Like, it's perfectly framed. And somehow the operator of this drone knew to point the camera there 5 seconds before it happened. And then same thing with the FBI footage from the plane, which is funny because this is the other drone that's also taking video footage of this. There's, 8,000 or 9,000 feet above this drone is the FBI with their airplane. And they also, for some reason, have this particular parking lot. Not just this particular parking lot, but the particular spot where Kyle ends up shooting Rosenbaum. They have that perfectly centered in frame 10 seconds before it happens. Now, I'm not alleging that anybody knew that this was going to happen. However, there's a preponderance of evidence that seems to defy statistical probability, right? A lot of times when you've got camera evidence, it's, you catch it in the side of a frame, it's off center, it's out of focus, and somehow we have dozens of camera angles, 2 of them from the air, perfectly centering Kyle's first shooting. I don't know. I don't even possibly have an idea of what conspiracy would explain this, but certainly the statistical probability of randomly pointing your camera at a direction and 10 seconds later in the center of your frame, one of the highest profile cases in a decade happens. I don't know. what do you guys think? I mean, am I crazy? Am I losing it? Did I drink too much fluoride water? Like, what's going on here? I don't know. I know that they were watching Kyle's group, but until Kyle starts running across that parking lot and Rosenbaum chases him, I don't think that Kyle was particularly interesting looking from the sky. You can see from the FBI footage, you can see from this footage, and you can see from the footage on the ground, until Kyle starts running and Rosenbaum starts chasing him, for about 5 seconds there, between when the chase starts and when Kyle shoots the gun, that is interesting. But the seconds prior to that, the seconds when this drone aims at that particular spot, the seconds when the FBI trains their camera on that particular spot, I don't think that spot was very interesting, and I don't think Kyle looked particularly noticeable as compared to the rest of the crowd milling about. I'm gonna move on from this. I just wanted to point out that I don't know. It seemed odd that everybody's camera just happened to be perfectly. I mean, right? This is the kind of evidence that you'd want for aliens, right? Like, it's all these shootings and stuff like that. It's always usually just like, you know, a few frames of some really low quality security camera from a gas station 3 blocks away. Right, and these 3 pixels are the shooter, and these 2 pixels are the person self-defending, right? But no, for Kyle, I mean, you actually have more than enough video footage from different angles that I'm surprised nobody's done this before. You could actually do a full 3D reconstruction of the event because you have enough angles of all the things and all the objects and all the timings. Somebody who was dedicated to doing it actually could do a full accurate 3D reconstruction of the event, at which point you'd be able to kind of, change the view at will. But I don't know. It just seems odd to me that there's so many perfectly framed shots that seem to be framed on that point several seconds prior to that point becoming interesting. I don't know. Alrighty. So beyond my conspiracy theories here. So we're still talking to Aunt Marini. Aunt Marini is viewing this drone footage. Then the state rests for a second, and the defense comes up to cross-examine. Kyle's defense team, cross-examining Detective Aunt Marini, asks and is informed that Detective Marini is the person who recommended, or no. Detective Aunt Marini was the person who recommended his partner detective not search Gage's phone. Why did Detective Aunt Marini tell his partner not to search Gage's phone? Well, remember previously that Gage's phone, Gage was filming at the time that he was shot and at the time that he was chasing Kyle. And for some reason, the detectives decided they did not want to search Gage's phone. They didn't want to download the video or any of the text messages out of Gage's phone, even though they had a search warrant to do it. The first detective on the case that we've heard from a few days ago, he was the person who specifically decided not to take Gage's phone and execute the search warrant on it. He was told by Detective Aunt Marini not to do that. Well, where did Detective Aunt Marini get the idea? Oh, it was Mr. Binger, the state prosecutor. The state prosecutor called Detective Aunt Marini a couple days after this all happened and told the state prosecutor, the prosecutor who's right now prosecuting the state's case against Kyle for shooting in part Gage. Detective Aunt Marini was told by Prosecutor Binger, don't search Gage's phone. Don't execute the search warrant. And Detective Aunt Marini goes, okay, I won't execute the search warrant. First time ever he doesn't execute the search warrant. So this isn't even the spot that I was talking about at the beginning of the show with there being some evidence now that Prosecutor Binger was coercing another witness. This is a separate bit of evidence that that Prosecutor Binger was attempting to influence the outcome of this trial by trying to get one of the detectives and successfully getting one of the detectives to purposefully not collect evidence that may have exonerated Kyle. This goes along with Detective Marini not asking for a swab on the part of the rifle that we know was touched. At every turn, the city is doing their best to not collect evidence that would exonerate Kyle, only collect evidence that is hurtful to his case. And now we find out that that prosecutor Binger, the lawyer prosecuting the case against Kyle, we now find out that he's got some influence here where he can just tell one of the detectives, hey, don't collect this piece of evidence, and the detectives listen to him. When this case is over, Binger's going to jail. if Binger doesn't go to jail, then justice has not been served here. Let's see here. The defense continues. We also know that the detectives never found Anthony Hubert's skateboard, the skateboard that he hit Kyle with twice. The detective gives this kind of wishy-washy answer as to why he didn't think it was important to look for that very hard. They asked Hubert's girlfriend, who, I don't know how she's surviving with herself not getting beaten on the regular, because as we know, Anthony Hubert was a serial domestic abuser, so any woman that would be with him for any length of time probably really enjoyed it. But she ended up with his skateboard after the shooting, and for some reason, after 14 months, the police and the detectives were unable to procure that skateboard from her for whatever reason. Kyle's defense lawyer essentially makes it clear to the jury through a line of questioning. It becomes clear that Detective Marini didn't try very hard to find that skateboard. And again, the state and the city doing their best to not collect evidence that would be exonerating to Kyle. Let's see here. The defense lawyers ask Detective Marini, does it look like Gage was chasing Kyle? You'll remember this is still yesterday's testimony. This is from day 5. This would have been an hour after Gage's testimony, where Gage tried very hard to say that he wasn't chasing Kyle. He was just running in the same direction as Kyle in a quick manner. Yeah. So, but the defense examining Detective Marini asks him, does it look like Gage is chasing Kyle in the video? The detective gives the same cagey response that Gage had. The detective says he was running in the same direction. And then the defense kind of goes, and the detective says, behind Kyle's path. So the Detective Marini's testimony is that Gage wasn't chasing Kyle. He was just running in the same direction behind Kyle's path. Now, Kyle's defense lawyer gave a facial expression, a series of facial expressions that were very similar to the facial expressions that I gave upon hearing this testimony. And the judge, I believe, reluctantly commented, please do not comment on the testimony of a witness, even with a facial reaction. So obviously Detective Marini was being very cagey with his answers, being as dishonest as he legally can be on the stand. That was obvious. Not that he was lying, but being as withholding of the truth as he possibly could be legally. And Kyle's lawyer, understanding this, gave a exasperated expression, and I'm sure the judge wanted to also give an exasperated expression, but he just made a comment that it's not appropriate for lawyers to comment on the testimony of a witness, even with facial expressions. The state goes back to examining Detective Marini. This is where we find out that this drone footage that we just watched, it might have been on Tucker Carlson Tonight at one point after the shooting. I don't remember having seen it on there, and I don't remember having seen this footage prior to the case, but it might have just been one of those videos that never got the traction that the other one did, even though clearly this is a really great angle of what happened. let's see here. Detective Marini testifies that this footage shows that Rosenbaum. Detective Marini testifies that this drone footage conclusively showed that Rosenbaum was not close enough to touch the gun at the time Kyle shot him, which I don't think really matters. And also Detective Marini's testimony is going to be blown out by another witness later on during day 6. However, it doesn't really matter if Rosenbaum was touching the gun or not. He was reaching for it. He was pursuing Kyle at a very high velocity, and Kyle was cornered. So I mean, again, this is where you get into some nitpicky logical fallacies. I guess. Okay, so is it the state's position that for Kyle to have a valid form of self-defense, Rosenbaum has to literally be close enough to touch Kyle's gun? Is that the position of the state right now? Because that appears to be what the state's position is, and I'm guessing that this won't. I'm guessing that this won't play super well with the jury. We don't know. We don't know what the jury is going to be thinking. Actually, if you want to know the best way of what a jury might be thinking, I would say that probably the analysis I'm doing is probably about as close as you're going to get to. Now, I would say I'm probably, of perhaps higher intellectual caliber than some of the average jurors. But regardless, I don't have a legal background per se. So me analyzing this from a lay perspective, I'm going to be analyzing it in the way with the knowledge base that a typical juror is going to have, or a more typical juror is going to have. So there's a lot of other people, and I thank you guys very much for choosing my stream here to be watching. There's a lot of other legal YouTubers who have like law review channels who are actually lawyers themselves reviewing this case. You can actually watch the full case yourself, or there's a lot of commentators doing really quick snap analysis and compressing 3 days of content into a 5-minute segment. But my commentary here without a legal background is me just looking at it from a lay perspective without any kind of legal background. So that's going to be an analysis that's much closer to what the jury's thinking. And it is my thought that this is not a very compelling line of reasoning. I don't think that it's very compelling for the state to be making the case that, well, Rosenbaum wasn't touching Kyle's gun, therefore there was no threat, therefore Kyle has no right to self-defense. I don't think that line of reasoning is going to hold up very well. Kyle's defense attorney cross-examines Detective Marini once more. They play the drone footage again, the drone footage that I just played. And Kyle's defense lawyer asks, can Detective Marini see Kyle pointing the gun at somebody prior to Rosenbaum chasing him? Detective Marini had previously stated that in the video we just watched, so I'll play a little bit of it again here. Prior to Rosenbaum chasing Kyle, Detective Marini testified that in this video he can see Kyle pointing his weapon at people. When asked, can Detective Marini point that out on the video? Now, the video that they're the same video, Detective Marini reports that he cannot point this out. That when he had noticed that, he was using pinch zoom on his iPhone, and since he couldn't do that in court and they didn't have a still blown up, he was unable to show the jury where it was in the footage that Kyle was allegedly pointing a gun at other people. And so Kyle's defense lawyer asked Detective Marini, so it's your testimony that this thing that you observed on your phone is unobservable in the video we have for the jury? And Detective Marini says yes. So I didn't realize that you could see unobservable things in video, but apparently you can, as long as you testify that it was unobservable, you can testify that you saw something in a video that is unobservable. Certainly, if it's good enough for Detective Marini, it's good enough for you. Once again, this is the side point of this whole series of shows I'm doing is basically a Fox explainer on how to be a good juror. So remember that, or a good witness. So if you're on the stand and you're a witness, just remember the Detective Marini rule. You are allowed to testify to unobservable things in a video that you're watching. That's the Detective Marini standard. If it's good enough for him, good enough for you. All right, that was not legal advice. The rest of the cross-examination and the rest of the defense, or the prosecutors talking to Detective Marini, was not eventful, uninteresting, just restating all the facts that we just went through. And then that marks the end of day 5. We then start in on day 6, which was today. We start the day off with a little bit of a news flash from the judge, just some house cleaning stuff. Apparently somebody was caught videotaping the jury members as they went to the courthouse this morning. The judge said that they grabbed the guy, made him delete his footage, and then they let him go. And they said if they catch him again, they will keep his phone, which I don't know if that's strong enough. I think that you need to immediately arrest and hold this person. I don't know who it was. I'm pretty sure that this counts as jury intimidation. I would imagine that if you arrested this person and ran through their background as to who they were associated with, I bet you'd come back with some interesting lefty organizations, I'm sure. Some other stuff that we haven't been talking about during this trial review series is a lot of the stuff going on outside the trial. But just for a little bit of context, there appears to be a lot of threats going on right now for the jury. We saw this with the Derek Chauvin trial, where there was a large volume of threats of violence against the jurors, and we saw what the result of that was those threats of violence. Those threats of violence were successful in getting the jury to convict Chauvin. It appears that there's a similar play going on right now at the Rittenhouse case, where the jurors are being, apparently we've got people walking around trying to film them. There's been a lot of threats on various social media from various members associated with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And I wouldn't be surprised if now that we're finding some stuff out about Prosecutor Binger, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little bit of a tactic from the state trying to get the case thrown out as a mistrial so they can try again next time, because as of right now their trial's not going super well. So the trial starts. They bring the jury in. Judge tells the jury that it's not a big deal that they were being filmed, that they have safety measures in place, to which I don't necessarily know if that's going to be good enough, but that is what it is. Then the state calls witness James Armstrong. James Armstrong is a forensic imager. He analyzed many of the videos being played as evidence for the trial. He is one of the people who added some of the annotations. So as we saw in some of the videos, there's like circles or boxes or names attached to people, and they follow them through through the video frame by frame. And it's kind of like a HUD or like a name tag that you'd see like in a video game. But those got on there. Those got annotated onto the video because this forensic imager, James Armstrong, added them to the video. Other than that, his testimony was kind of boring, just kind of discussing the finer points of image quality and image resolution and pixel interpolation and a lot of boring nerd stuff that I found way more fascinating than I should have. Then the Kyle's defense doesn't want to talk to him because there's nothing interesting to say. Really, he was just there to explain where the videos came from. He wasn't testifying for or against anything Kyle did. It was just, here's where these videos came from so that they can be admitted to evidence. The state then calls Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly was interesting. Dr. Kelly is a forensic pathologist. Basically, he's the guy who does autopsies. He determines causes of death. He testified that Anthony died of a gunshot wound, to which I wrote in my notes that this is speculation because it appears to me that Anthony Hubert died of being an idiot. Dr. Kelly describes what gunpowder stimpling is. So stimpling is it's a word that you might know, but it has different meanings in different contexts. So in the realm of gun culture, stimpling is a grippy texture that you can put onto your grip or in various locations on your firearm to give your hand something more grippy to hang on to. Apparently, there's also a thing called gunpowder stimpling in the realm of forensic pathology. And what that is that when you shoot somebody at close range, they get hit not only by the bullet, but if they're close enough, there will also be the hot gases and unburnt or still burning gunpowder that comes out of the barrel that will also hit the person if they are near the muzzle of the rifle or the gun. So one of the things this gunpowder stimpling does is when you look at a gunshot wound, if the person was close enough to the gun, there will be also a lot of little bumps, little abrasions, stimpling around the wound where gunpowder that was still moving at a high velocity, even though it's a very small grain of it, was moving at a high enough velocity to still damage the skin that it was hitting. Now, the range for gunpowder stimpling is very close. It's got to be within about 4 feet, maybe closer for some rifles, maybe a little further away for other things. But basically, after about 5-6 feet, you're not going to see gunpowder stimpling because the gunpowder doesn't have any aerodynamics to it, and so it's going to lose energy, lose velocity very quickly. I'm essentially summing up what Dr. Kelly's testimony and explanation of stimpling was. So why is stimpling important? Well, the stimpling is important because if Rosenbaum had stimpling on his gunshot wounds, that would imply that he was extremely close to the muzzle when Kyle shot the rifle. If Rosenbaum doesn't have stimpling, then it would imply that Kyle took a little bit more of a ranged shot, though I don't know if I would necessarily qualify 5 feet or more as a ranged shot. Certainly, it's a little further away than 4 feet, but I don't know if I would consider 5 feet to be a not very close. If you are now, it's well known statistic that about 20 feet is the effective range of somebody with a knife. They can cover about 20 feet at a dead sprint with a knife within about 1.5 seconds, which is about what your reaction time to defend yourself is going to be. That's well known for anybody who's familiar with defense tactics, martial arts, or police training or combat training, is that about 20 feet is your radius of hyper quick reaction time. Where somebody's coming at you with a knife within 20 feet, you're probably going to be injured. Depending on what you do to prepare yourself within that 20 feet, you can maybe mitigate that, but the likelihood is that you're probably going to get that knife in you at some point if they're within 20 feet of you. If they're outside 20 feet, you can probably do something to stop them from getting to you, especially if you have a weapon, a firearm on you. So again, the stimpling is... It will be relevant because, spoiler alert, there was stimpling on Rosenbaum, so he was definitely within 4 feet of Kyle. But it also doesn't matter because even if he didn't have stimpling, Rosenbaum was way within 20 feet of closing distance with Kyle. So I don't think that, again, this is where you've got this very nuanced, nitpicky, logical fallacy that the state is basing their case off of, trying to say to the jury, well, you know, if Rosenbaum's further than 4 feet away, he's basically not a threat to Kyle because he's a whole 4 feet away. I mean, that's like, you know, that's from like, you know, here to the moon, basically. It's just might as well be infinity. Within 4 feet, well, you know, now we're starting to get into danger territory. But that just doesn't hold up. It's just not true. It's not accurate. 4 feet is just as dangerous and deadly as 3 feet, just as dangerous and deadly as 5 feet. When you're in that close of range, you're really splitting hairs as to the danger level of plus or minus a foot. They're all dangerous. It's just that on the closer side of 5 feet, you get Stimpling. On the further side of 5 feet, you don't get Stimpling. Like I said, though, spoiler alert, Rosenbaum had Stimpling, which means that he was so close to the barrel of the rifle that the gunpowder from the 223 was still moving fast enough, even though it has no aerodynamics to it. It was still moving fast enough to damage the skin around the entry wound of the bullet. So, actually, what you guys are seeing on screen here, the person in center frame, way in the background, that is actually Dr. Kelly. The person who is standing in front of a rifle. We'll get into this image here in a second, because, wow. We'll get back into this, but just so you know who Dr. Kelly is, he's the guy in the middle of this picture here. Let's see here. So, now, Dr. Kelly also, so he examined Rosenbaum's body and Anthony Hubert's body. He could not identify, he could kind of identify using the video as an aid, what the order of the shots into Rosenbaum's body were. But basically, Kelly just kind of goes through in no particular order the bullet holes in Rosenbaum. We know for a fact from the video that Kyle shot Rosenbaum 4 times. What I think we might have known earlier, but I think it might have been news to me, was that Kyle only shot Rosenbaum 4 times, but he put 5 holes into Rosenbaum. So that kind of makes up for Kyle's 2 missed shots at Jump Kick Man. That would still put Kyle's hit rate at 7 out of 8, even though he missed 2 bullets, didn't hit anybody. One of his bullets hit a person twice, so he still has his his KD's up pretty high. So one of the shots, and we think it's the first shot that Kyle put into Rosenbaum, went through Rosenbaum's groin, and then the bullet got stuck in Rosenbaum's ass cheek. Not exactly the language that Dr. Kelly used. It's the language I'm using. And as we know, Rosenbaum was a horrifically violent pedophile, and again, anally raping 5-year-olds brutally. He was in jail for 12 years for doing that to 5 kids, 5 through 13, which I can't believe that he only got 12 years for that. And so you've got a pedophile rapist chasing Kyle, who was underage at the time. He was 17. The last words Rosenbaum would ever say is "fuck you" to a minor, to a child. And then Kyle shot him through the groin with the bullet getting lodged in his ass. I think that's funny. There is gunpowder stimpling on Rosenbaum's abdomen, but not below his belt. Why? Well, because Rosenbaum took off his shirt and put it on his head like a maniac. And if Rosenbaum hadn't been a maniac and hadn't had his belly exposed, there wouldn't be stimpling on it. But because Rosenbaum's such a fucking idiot and a madman, took his shirt off, put it on his head, well, now his stomach's exposed, and now we get to see in its full glory the stimpling of the gunpowder that proves Rosenbaum was within 4 feet of the end of Kyle's rifle barrel. So I guess we can all thank the pedophile for taking his shirt off, which is a little bit on the nose there, that he's trying to strip down in front of a minor again, trying to expose himself. But in him trying to expose himself to a minor, he exposed himself to getting stimpling, and we now know that he was within very close proximity of the rifle. And somebody is at my door. Okay. Let's see here. The range for the estimated range, again, based on the stimpling, was within 4 feet. We then go on to the second and third bullet hole, which was an injury to the hand. So Kyle's rifle sent a bullet through Rosenbaum's hand in a rather complicated fashion. That's something that you would have to watch the testimony to gather, because it's the way that it went through Rosenbaum's hand was extremely complicated. I can't even begin to recite it. There's really no point in it. Just know that it went through his hand, and then it went into his leg after it went through his hand. There was a lot of soot on Rosenbaum's hand. However, the soot was not usually, and again, the soot would be smoke and gunpowder and debris coming out of the rifle barrel that would only be on your skin if you were extremely close to the rifle when it was fired. You can see the image here actually is a little bit of a recreation of how Rosenbaum's hand possibly was in contact with the rifle. And what you can see is that the hand, part of the hand, you can't really see where the actual tip of the barrel is, but basically what it looks like is that Rosenbaum was attempting to grab the rifle, and the tip of the rifle would have ended up in the palm of his hand. And so the soot pattern on Rosenbaum's hand reflects that, where half of his hand is very heavily sooted and the other half of his hand is not sooted at all. And that would be because part of his hand, the half that was unsooted, was past the front of the barrel over top of the barrel, whereas the rest of his hand was in front of the barrel and would have picked up the soot when it was fired. So there's also, interestingly, apparently the palm of the hand can't pick up stimpling from the gunpowder. It can pick up the soot, but it can't pick up that type of stimpling damage that I was talking about earlier, because I guess the palm is too tough to pick that up. But again, it goes to this is supposed to be the state's witness. This witness is supposed to be helping the state make their case against Kyle. Part of the state's case against Kyle is that Rosenbaum wasn't close enough to grab Kyle's gun. And yet we've got the state witness, this Dr. Kelly here, testifying that, well, it was clear that Rosenbaum's belly was within 4 feet of the rifle. Now, you can imagine that, well, your stomach, your hand is longer away from your body than your stomach, right? If you're reaching out for something, especially if you're leaning forward, you can really quickly get your hand 3, maybe even 4 feet away from where your belly is. At least 3 feet, right? So if you just stand up right now, lean forward with your hand outstretched like you're trying to grab somebody's rifle from them, all of a sudden your hand is 4 feet away from your belly. And so when Kyle shoots, he can get half of Rosenbaum's hand covered in soot, the other half not covered, because that was the part that was over top of the rifle beyond where the muzzle was, and yet Rosenbaum's stomach can still pick up stimpling injury that's within 4 feet of the muzzle blast. So this all makes perfect sense to me. It all seems to make perfect sense to this forensic pathologist, Dr. Kelly. I'm pretty confident this was made rather clear to the jury. I think that it could have maybe explained a little bit better, but it was rather obvious that all of the injuries were consistent with Rosenbaum reaching out, leaning forward. Also, guess what? We don't even have to guess what position Rosenbaum was in, because we can see it in the goddamn videos. I mean, that's one of the most amazing things about this, is that you've got all this forensic evidence, which is normally what you'd be reliant on in a case like this, because normally you're not going to have any video evidence of it. But we've got all this amazing forensic evidence which seems to back up the defense's case, and then you've also got all of the video evidence that doesn't just back it up, it proves it conclusively. All right. The Dr. Kelly, when asked specifically, and he's being asked by the state prosecutor, this isn't even the defense cross-examining him. The state prosecutor asks him a question, and Dr. Kelly responds that the Rosenbaum's hand was either in close proximity or equally likely that it was in contact with the rifle at the time Kyle shot. So the state's own witness is testifying it's possible that Rosenbaum's hand was in contact with the rifle. Well, he doesn't have to prove or say conclusively it was in contact with the rifle. There just needs to be the benefit of the doubt that it's in Kyle's favor. Kyle doesn't have to prove conclusively anything. He just needs to have the benefit of the doubt. And so when in doubt, right now, the Dr. Kelly has set up a moment of doubt. Was Rosenbaum's hand in proximity of the rifle, or was it touching the rifle? We don't know. It's doubt. Well, what is the jury instruction? When in doubt, you give the benefit of it to the defendant. So Kyle, in this moment, the jury has no choice but to give Kyle the benefit of the doubt and take this testimony as though it were Rosenbaum was touching the rifle conclusively. That is what they have to do legally, because you're supposed to give the defendant the benefit of the doubt, the benefit being that Rosenbaum touching the rifle would be of benefit to Kyle's case. So that was fantastic testimony in favor of Kyle's case right there. Let me grab a drink here before I choke to death. Rosenbaum did get what he deserved, and Rittenhouse is a legend. Let's see here. Wolfwind says that they just spy on us all the time, basically, and that's probably why there's footage of everything. I would agree with that. That's probably accurate. Alrighty, so Dr. Kelly gave us all this great information, and that was only the state asking their own witness stuff. Then we get to Kyle's defense attorney doing the cross-examination. So the cross-examination starts off with confirming your testimony is that Rosenbaum's hand could have been in contact with the rifle. Yes. Then the defense attorney, the image that you're seeing here is part of this segment that I'm about to go through here, this part. The defense attorney describes various ways in which Rosenbaum's hand could have grasped the barrel or been reaching for the barrel. He described several different methods of aggressively grabbing for the barrel. Most of them, Dr. Kelly responded that this makes sense. This is consistent with what my findings were. The defense then moves on to talking about Mr. Hubert's body, who we've only been talking about Rosenbaum so far. Dr. Kelly testifies that he sees Hubert hit Kyle with a skateboard, which I believe that was unprompted even. Again, this is funny because the state's case is that Kyle was never hit with a skateboard, even though we see it happen twice on video. It's so much so that Binger, the prosecutor, called Detective Marini and told him, he didn't tell him not to get the skateboard. He told him not to get Gage's phone. But we know that Detective Marini also decided not to try very hard to get that skateboard. It is Detective Binger's case that skateboard never hit Kyle. Dr. Kelly is Prosecutor Binger's witness. And then just unprompted, Dr. Kelly says, yeah, Hubert hit Kyle with the skateboard. Okay. The state tries to object. Again, right now Kyle's defense attorney is doing the cross-examination. After the state's own witness testifies that their case is bunk, that Hubert did hit Kyle with the skateboard, the state tries to object, which was very funny, to which the judge responds. Basically, Prosecutor Binger tried to object, saying that whether or not Hubert hit Kyle with the skateboard is basically outside the scope of Dr. Kelly's expertise. And the judge says, well, if Dr. Kelly saw it in a video, then he saw it in a video. So I think it's pretty funny. Then the defense asks Dr. Kelly, did Hubert grab the gun? Dr. Kelly. A lot of names and titles here. Kyle's defense attorney asks Dr. Kelly, did Anthony Hubert grab Kyle's rifle? Dr. Kelly responds, yes. The state has been trying to establish in their case so far that they go back to talking about Rosenbaum's body. The state's been trying to establish in their case, they even brought it up in their opening statement, that Kyle shot Rosenbaum in the back. That's what the state's been going on over and over again, saying that Kyle shot Rosenbaum in the back. They tried to say this in their opening statement as if Rosenbaum was running away and Kyle shot him in the back. Or you'll remember at the beginning of the trial, they've kind of given it up, but at the beginning of the trial, the opening testimony from the state was that Kyle chased Rosenbaum down and shot him in the back, which is 100% false. That none of that is true at all. It was actually precisely the opposite. It was precisely the opposite. Rosenbaum was chasing Kyle down, and Kyle shot a person that was facing him. We'll get into how that gunshot entered Rosenbaum's back. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But the entire time, the state has up until now been trying to make the case that Kyle cold-bloodedly shot Rosenbaum in the back. Well, Kyle's defense attorney asks Dr. Kelly, to explain this shot in the back, please. So basically what happened is Dr. Kelly, they asked Dr. Kelly, at any point did Rosenbaum have his back turned to Kyle? And Dr. Kelly replies that, based off the video evidence and the forensic evidence of where the bullet entered the back at no point in time did Rosenbaum turn around and have his back to Kyle. The way the bullet ended up in Rosenbaum's back is that it was barely in his back. Rosenbaum, because he was lunging forward, again, you can at home right now do it yourself. Stand up, lean forward with your arms stretched out. Not only will you find that your hand is approximately 4 feet away from your belly, you'll also find that your back is now parallel with the ground, or nearly parallel with the ground, and somebody firing a rifle at you, also about parallel with the ground, it's going to enter your upper shoulder and go straight through your body, out your lower back, or out through your buttocks area. Well, that's what happened to Rosenbaum, is that because he was leaning forward with his stomach about 4 feet away from the muzzle and his hand grasping at the muzzle, leaning forward, all of this consistent with Rosenbaum lunging, which was previously testified by Richie McGinnis, that Rosenbaum was lunging at Kyle. The body position of lunging is going and getting a gun fired at you is going to result in that bullet entering your upper shoulder. And the upper shoulder is where Dr. Kelly testified that the bullet entered. The state is trying to make this upper shoulder into Rosenbaum's back, and in doing so trying to build this false reality where Rosenbaum's back was turned to Kyle and Kyle just shot him in the back. But really, it was just a natural result of Rosenbaum lunging. In fact, it gives more credence to the fact that had Kyle not shot Rosenbaum, Rosenbaum would have connected with Kyle, got him to the ground, and who knows what? This guy's a rapist. Who knows what he would have done to Kyle? Am I alleging that Rosenbaum was going to rape Kyle there in the street? Well, I don't know. He brutally raped 5-year-olds, 5 of them, and went to jail for 12 years. Who knows what he would have done to Kyle right there in the street? So the state's whole case, not only does it once again only prove that Kyle was in more need of self-defense, it also is just completely the opposite of what happened. Again, the state trying to say, well, Rosenbaum's back was turned to Kyle. No, it wasn't. Rosenbaum was lunging at Kyle. That's literally the opposite of turning your back to Kyle. Ridiculous. The state goes back up to directly examine Dr. Kelly once again. The state tries to say, well, aren't the injuries also consistent with falling? The state trying to say that, well, maybe Rosenbaum didn't have a back turn, but maybe it was falling, which I think that, I don't necessarily know that he was falling so much as he was lunging with style. That's what I think happened. There was some discussion about the absence of a muzzle stamp. So if you've ever fired a rifle, you know that you know touchy the hati part of the barrel after you shoot it, because it will burn you. A muzzle stamp is what happens when you are close enough to I guess typically when you get shot by the rifle, but I guess you could get it one at any time if you just touch your skin to the muzzle after it was fired. What happens sometimes in close quarters shooting is that a gunshot is so close to the muzzle when it enters the body that the skin kind of ripples up and then touches the muzzle, which is still extremely hot, and that results in a burn or a muzzle stamp. That's what it's known as. So there was a question from the state. There was no muzzle stamp on Mr. Rosenbaum's hand, was there? Trying to say that, well, Rosenbaum's hand wasn't near the muzzle, even though we already know that it was. And they're trying to say, well, there was no muzzle stamp on his hand. And Dr. Kelly says, yes. But then Dr. Kelly adds some more context to it. It says, yes, Rosenbaum did not have a muzzle stamp on his hand, but also because of the thickness of the palm, you typically don't see a muzzle stamp on the palm because the skin of the palm doesn't ripple in the same way that shooting somebody in a different area of their body would. So you're not going to expect to see stimpling, and you're not going to expect to see a muzzle stamp on Rosenbaum's hand. So the state's trying to build this case, well, Rosenbaum's hand wasn't anywhere near the rifle because it didn't have stimpling and it didn't have a muzzle stamp. And their own witness, Dr. Kelly, says, yeah, but you wouldn't expect to see those things even if it was close. So that doesn't prove anything. The state... The state then tries to, So as I previously explained, Rosenbaum's hand, half of it was sooted, the other half was not sooted because half of his hand was in front of the muzzle, the other half of his hand was so far over the muzzle. Again, I mean, if it's past where the muzzle is, that means that it's over top of the barrel, which means that it's, ready. Where do you grab something? Well, you grab it in the palm of your hand like that. So he's pretty close to grabbing the barrel. So half of his hand's sooted, the other half's not, indicating that he was ready to grab the tip of the rifle. Just the tip, though. The state grabs onto it because this is pretty damning evidence, right? It's pretty damning when you explain that pattern of half sooted, half not sooted. That essentially is case closed. Rosenbaum was inches away and microseconds away from grabbing Kyle's rifle. That just seems to be conclusive based off that soot pattern that Dr. Kelly just testified to. Well, the state tries to debunk this by saying, well, if Mr. Rosenbaum was holding something, wouldn't that result in a similar odd pattern? And Dr. Kelly says, well, actually, no, it wasn't Dr. Kelly. It was the judge interrupted and said, well, he wasn't holding anything. He already threw the bag. So as we know, something that's been brought up over and over and over again is that Rosenbaum was holding a hospital bag throughout the night. We know that as he was chasing Kyle, he threw that bag at Kyle, not really to much effect. But clearly when Kyle shot Rosenbaum was after Rosenbaum had thrown the bag. Certainly the state is not trying to argue that Rosenbaum threw the bag at Kyle after Kyle shot him. So I'm not sure why they would ask, and the judge was also confused. Why would they ask, would the pattern on Rosenbaum's hand look like that if he was holding something? And the judge says, well, no, you're going to have to rephrase the question because we already know that he wasn't holding anything. There wasn't anything being held on camera. The one thing he was holding, we watched him throw it about a second prior. So what are you talking about? This was completely irrelevant. And the state kind of tried to rephrase their question and moved on. Then the state... Well, you can see the defense. This is Kyle's defense lawyer here standing in front of a rifle. The state tried to start doing the state tried to start doing demonstrations of how Rosenbaum might be falling in front of the rifle. Again, I don't know. I don't really know what effect that's going to have. Again, the difference between falling and lunging is not much. But they started basically pointing the rifle at each other and giving various demonstrations to the jury that, this is how he might have done it. The judge very quickly says, okay, stop. You need to check to make sure it's unloaded. Both of you need to check to make sure it's unloaded. Because the judge understands fucking gun safety. Nobody else goddamn does. Also, I don't know, maybe this is standard fare in a courtroom, but that doesn't mean that's standard gun safety. I really don't understand the need to be used. The rifle that you're seeing in this image right now, that is Kyle's rifle. That is Kyle's fully assembled rifle, ready to fire. Now, it's unloaded, and they checked if it was unloaded about 10 times, but basically most of today we watched the defense attorneys and the state attorneys point a rifle at each other. I don't know, guys. I really that was, I don't know. Now what's interesting here, and I'm going to get into the origin of this photo here in a second. The defense did kind of a demonstration of how Rosenbaum might have been reaching or falling towards the rifle. The state then pops up the defense then pops up for a cross-examination, and they also do a demonstration of how, not by falling, but by lunging, what would be a position that would be consistent with the wounds. And so basically they're setting up this kind of vignette and asking Dr. Kelly, is this positioning consistent with the wounds that you saw? And the state had just done the same kind of demonstration for a fall, and this defense gets up and does the same demonstration for a lunge, and the judge finds the defense's vignette so compelling, he actually says, hold that, I'm going to invite the media up to take pictures of your pose here. And so that's where this image that you're looking at right now comes from, is that the judge actually invited the media to come up and take pictures of what was going on, and they then admitted those pictures into evidence for the jury to look at later. But what I think's funny is that the state had done the exact same thing moments earlier, and then the defense pops up and they do it, and the judge goes, oh yeah, that's pretty compelling, let's take some pictures of that. The state, after they get done taking their pictures and pointing rifles at each other, the state then tries again with this fall narrative, saying that basically they're trying to say that since the first two shots probably entered Rosenbaum's hips, that would have made him fall. But we have already established that all four shots that Kyle sent into Rosenbaum, they took place over the course of 0.76 seconds. 76 100ths of a second, 0.76 seconds. So about 3/4 of a second. That's really goddamn quick. That's extremely quick. I mean, that is within about your reaction time. Like, your reaction time is probably going to be at like 0.25 seconds. So if the first two shots, if you imagine a consistent timing between shots, that your first two shots are going to be at about 39 hundredths of a second, 38 hundredths of a second. By the time Kyle gets done with the next two shots and he's at 76 hundredths of a second, he's really only had maybe a tenth of a second to start reacting to it. And that's probably within his reaction time. So I really don't understand what the state's obsession is that, well, if Rosenbaum was falling 0.001 seconds after he was lunging at Kyle, then that makes Kyle wrong. Again, we talked about this yesterday. Essentially, the state's position on, if you look at all the self-defense instances, you've got If you attack somebody in self-defense, if you use force in self-defense against somebody who just attacked you, well, your use of self-defense is unwarranted because the attack is over. You're no longer in danger. Or if you use self-defense to shoot somebody who is about to attack you, well, your use of self-defense is unjustified because they haven't attacked you yet. That's the state's position. And so the state's position in the specific charge for Rosenbaum is that, well, Rosenbaum, he might have been lunging at Kyle. He might have been reaching for the rifle, and Kyle might have shot him 3 times, but it was that last shot that was unnecessary because, well, Rosenbaum had been done attacking Kyle for a whole 0.01 seconds, and he was falling, and Kyle ruthlessly, cold-bloodedly chose to shoot him in the back. That's just not true. It's just, there's no way. If that is what holds up in this case, if that argument that 0.01 seconds after somebody's no longer a threat because you shot them, because they were a threat to you a single second or a single tenth of a second prior, if that's what holds up in court, then essentially there is no self-defense. Either Kyle gets off on self-defense here, or self-defense does not exist in the state of Wisconsin. That is the 2 options here, because right now the state's position on what doesn't constitute self-defense, it's not tenable. It is just not a thing that is consistent with the way reality works, and it would essentially mean that the self-defense privilege is unusable in any context, and that just can't be. In fact, I would like to see the state of Wisconsin, after Kyle gets acquitted, which he better, I would like to see some legislature at the Wisconsin State House put forward some bills that strengthen and clarify self-defense. I would even love to hear it called the Rittenhouse bill. I'd love to see federally. Let's get some of these do-nothing Republicans. Let's put together a bill that's the Rittenhouse Act. Let's put together a national bill, certainly within each state, but call it the Rittenhouse Act. Strengthen self-defense, clarify self-defense based off of what happened to Rittenhouse and the way Rittenhouse responded. Have that be the clarification for self-defense in every state, and call it the Rittenhouse Act. So again, the state tried again with this falling narrative that, well, because Rosenbaum was falling for a tenth of a second, that means Kyle's cold-blooded. I don't think it's compelling. The defense picks back up and examines directly and says, well, even if Rosenbaum was falling, he would still have forward momentum, right? Dr. Kelly responds, yes, the shots did not impart enough force to change his trajectory. So if Rosenbaum was going forward, then he would have been moving forward prior to the shots. It wasn't the shots that drew him forward or sent him backwards. And then the defense says, so if he was already falling or lunging towards Kyle, that means that he had built up momentum prior to being shot. The answer is yes. There's some questions to clarify. Could the initial shots into the pelvis, could that have caused Rosenbaum to double over? I don't think that's very compelling, because it seems that the forensic evidence and the video evidence seems to imply, and the testimony from Richie McGinnis, it seems to imply that Rosenbaum was already in a forward-leaning position, like a linebacker kind of a thing, like somebody who's ready to pounce, somebody who's lunging. So it seems to me that it wasn't the shots from Kyle that caused Rosenbaum to lean forward, but rather Rosenbaum was already leant forward, and the state just doesn't have a case there. It's ridiculous. They take a break. I think it's for lunch. They return. The judge starts off the session by saying that they are going to strike the testimony of the FBI agent from a few days ago because it was incomplete. I'm not exactly sure what he means by incomplete, but basically what that means is that the jury is to completely forget everything the FBI agent told them during testimony, and all of the FBI's agent's testimony will be stricken from the record, and it won't be available to the jury when they are in their deliberation process. That's pretty interesting. We also had the announcement that there was, I didn't know that there was a seventh count. I thought there was only 6 counts, but apparently there was a seventh count against Kyle, a seventh charge for curfew violation. That was one of the things Kyle was being charged with. The judge has decided that the curfew violation is going to be dropped, and that is no longer up for consideration. So, 1 out of 7, not too bad. We'll see if we can get the rest of them knocked off, but 1 out of 7 is not too bad. The state, after they come back and the judge makes these announcements, the state very proudly says, "We rest our case." Which, that means the state is done calling witnesses, and it's now the defense's turn to call witnesses, after which we will go into deliberation. So we are now in the stage where the defense, Kyle's defense team, is calling their own witnesses, which, whoa boy, was that ever interesting today. So, the defense starts off by calling Nick Smith. Nick Smith worked for CarSource until 2019, CarSource again being the car lot that Kyle's group was defending. The defense attorney asks, "Did you have contact with someone at CarSource?" The Nick Smith says that yes, on the 24th, Sam, the owner, Sam is the person that we've previously heard testimony from. He is the owner / son / family member of the Sam's family as a group owns several car-related businesses, and individual members of the family own individual properties within kind of their family group. So Sam owned, apparently, based off his testimony, he owned the particular car source that Kyle's group started out at. That's what I'm understanding. And Nick Smith testified that Sam had called him to tell on Monday night, saying that the car doctor, which was their mechanic shop across the street, that was on fire and that needed help. We know that place was on fire on Monday night because that is part of the very famous imagery of Kenosha, of that car lot just completely ablaze and turning the sky orange. It's a very well-known image from the Kenosha riots. Well, Sam, a couple of days ago, last week, had testified he didn't call or ask anybody to come defend the property. Sam is now, Nick is now testifying, nope, Sam did call me. Sam called me and told me that there was a fire and that he needed help, which also kind of goes against Detective Marini's supposition that the police and fire department were still responding to calls. Clearly that was a lie. The 24th is Monday, 25th is Tuesday, which is the day of the shooting. Nick Smith testifies that on the morning of the 25th, Sam called him for help to defend their CarSource building that night. Again, that would be the building that Kyle starts off his defense at. Nick Smith says he had contact with Dominic Black. Dominic Black was the first person that testified. He's the person who he says that Kyle and him considered each other brothers, and they were hanging out the entire day of Tuesday, doing stuff together prior to arriving on the scene and then going off and doing what they would eventually do that night. So Nick Smith says that he had contact with Dominic Black. Kyle was with Dominic, and Dominic was driving, and they went and picked up Nick Smith earlier in the day. Nick Smith's intention was to go get body armor for that night. Kyle lent Nick Smith his body armor. Kyle is the kind of guy, 17-year-old kid, who spends his afternoons cleaning up graffiti. And Kyle's not just the kind of guy that would give you the shirt off his back. Kyle literally gave somebody the plate carriers off his back. Kyle would give you the body armor off his back. That's the kind of guy Kyle is. I mean, some guys wouldn't even give you their shirt, but Kyle would give you his body armor. And as we know, Kyle needed that body armor. Actually, I would hazard a guess that Kyle giving Nick Smith his body armor earlier in the day, I think that probably ended up saving Kyle's life. Kyle had some very nimble movements that night, and Kyle's not the He's not unfit for sure, but he's not the fittest guy I've ever seen. But he was pretty nimble that night. I think if he had a plate carrier on him that night, I think he probably would have died. I think Gage would have shot him in the head. I think Rosenbaum would have caught him. I think somebody would have got his rifle away from him, got him tripped up, bashed him in the head with a rock or a skateboard. I think Kyle would have absolutely died that night had he been wearing body armor, just because of the loss of movement. If you've ever worn body armor, it's not a total loss of movement, but it's not full movement. And Kyle needed every bit of movement he had that night. And I can think of several spots in the video, having reviewed it in my head. I can think of several spots in the video where Kyle's arm movements would have been impeded by having body armor. I think his speed would have been impeded by having body armor, and just his general agility would have been impeded as well. So this decision to give Nick his body armor, I think that goes a lot towards the type of person Kyle is. Again, Kyle's the kind of person who would give you the body armor off his back. Barely even knows the guy, willing to give him the body armor off his back. But also that's a decision that I think went on to save Kyle's life. Let's see here. Nick Smith testifies that Sam, the owner of CarSource, gave Nick a hug and thanked him for coming on the night of the 25th. Which, again, Sam testified that he didn't invite these people. He didn't give them permission or anything like that. Nick Smith testifies that Sam offered the group money to defend CarSource. Now, this is a big deal because Sam right now is facing potential legal action that because Rosenbaum died on one of his properties, if it turns out that Sam hired these people to defend his property and Rosenbaum died as a result, well, now Sam's on the hook for a civil lawsuit. So Sam had previously testified he didn't invite these people, he didn't pay them, he didn't want them on the lot, etc., etc., etc. But Nick Smith has been kind of causing some holes in that narrative. Sal is Sam's brother. Sam and Sal are not their names. Their names are very long Indian names. But everybody's been referring to them as Sam and Sal. Sal is Sam's brother. He gave Nick Smith keys to one of the other locations so they could get inside the building. Again, Sam and Sal are the owner's kids that we spoke to earlier. Again, they're kind of a family that owns a bunch of these car lots. It's kind of unclear what the specific ownership is. They kind of had conflicting testimony, which is why it's confusing. But like I said, essentially what I'm able to gather is that this family, they owned dozens of car lots and mechanic shops all across the state. Certain members of their family had certain properties in their name. So like their mother owned the mechanic shop called Car Doctor. Sam owned one of the car lots in Kenosha. His dad owned another car lot in Kenosha, and Sal owned one of the car lots in Milwaukee. But it sounds like it was just kind of like, I don't know, probably like for business purposes, just having it in different people's names. But that's why it's complicated, and I don't think it really matters to get into that complication. It's just suffice it to say that Sam and Sal were people who have an ownership stake in the business. They are people who would be authorized to make the type of business decision that they did that night in saying that we're going to hire people to defend this property. And they're also the people who are going to be on the hook legally if there's any kind of liability as a result of that decision. That's really all the more context that you need to know. Let's see here. Nick Smith said that he was there at CarSource at the beginning of the night with Kyle and Dominic. And at that point, a car full of people that they'd never met before drove by and asked if they needed help defending the property. Nick said yes. Nick, in a picture of everybody outside the CarSource, which we've seen on previous nights, if you're remembering back to that picture, which I don't have to pull up right now, Nick is the person with the white hat and a red cross on the front of it. Nick said that his brother was an army medic or something and taught him how to handle gunshot wounds. Nick Smith testifies that the police pushed rioters towards them. Again, we've heard this from multiple people, multiple testimonies, that the police that night had made a concerted decision to push rioters away from the courthouse and towards the people defending businesses. I've already made my case as to what I thought about that on previous shows, so I'll spare you this time. But this just further confirms that that is something that happened that night, that the police did make a decision that they were going to push the rioters away from the courthouse and force a group of armed civilians to have to deal with it instead of the police dealing with it as they should. Nick Smith testified that Ryan Bouch gave him a pistol. Ryan Bouch is somebody who we've heard from earlier. He's the guy who testified that Rosenbaum came up to him and Kyle earlier in the night and told them that Rosenbaum was going to kill either Kyle or Ryan if he ever found them later that night alone, which that was very shocking testimony at the time. Ryan Bouch also testified that he gave his pistol to Nick. This is Nick now that we're hearing from. Nick says, yes, Ryan did indeed give me a pistol for protection after the police told us that they were going to push the rioters down towards us. So Nick had previously testified he had just been wearing body armor. He didn't feel the need to be carrying a firearm. But when the police told them, hey, it's not just you're defending your business now. Now we're going to force a bunch of rioters who were trying to burn down the courthouse. We're going to force 250 of them down to you guys for you guys to deal with. All of a sudden, Nick thinks, wow, that's a little more dangerous than what we were doing before. And Ryan says, here's a pistol. Good luck. This is absolute anarchy. This is anarcho-tyranny, where, again, the anarchy is that the government has decided to forsake rule of law, abandon the citizen to the whims of gang members of BLM and Antifa. There are no laws that night. And then the tyranny part comes in the next morning, where now the state wants to judge Kyle in how he acted during that time of anarchy. Nick is at the car source when Kyle gets back after the shootings. He, along with other people, suggested that Kyle should turn himself into the police. Also, this is after Kyle had already tried to turn himself into the police. Nick then testifies that he abandoned the car source out of fear that the rioters were following Kyle and that they would try to hurt people that were with Kyle. Very reasonable. State does cross-examination. They start off with trying to ask Nick about his juvenile convictions and his juvenile criminal record. The judge immediately says, "Nope, stop. We're not gonna do that. That's an irrelevant line of questioning. Has no bearing on what happened that night." And the judge blocks that line of questioning. The state then asks about Kyle letting Nick borrow the body armor. Again, all this does is go to Kyle's character, that Kyle's the kind of guy that would give you the body armor off his back. Let's see here. Nick testifies that the owners of Car Source were not on location that night, which is kind of shitty of them to ask for people to defend their property, but they're not willing to be there themselves. The owners, Nick again confirms his testimony from previously that the owners did indeed offer to pay the group a few $100s for defending the property. Nick testified that they have not yet received that few $100. I'm guessing that they never will. The state said nothing about the building, whether or not the building was damaged. What did I mean here? Let me try to decipher my typing here. The state basically said, was the building damaged? Nick said no. And was it damaged at all that night? And Nick said no. And I think that's kind of a stupid line of questioning, because guess what the reasoning for Car Source not being damaged that night was? Well, because it had a bunch of armed people guarding it. So the state is trying to say, well, because Car Source wasn't damaged, that proves that there was no need for it to be defended that night. Well, the reason it wasn't damaged that night is because it was being defended, and the entire parking lot was full of burned out cars from the night before. Clearly it needed to be defended. The state also, the state prosecutor, Binger, also in his line of questioning concedes the point that the police had pushed rioters away from the courthouse and towards the car source for the armed civilians to deal with. Again, The police set up this situation. The police, and we've seen this in other cities, where the police will force rioters towards certain areas. We've seen this with the Proud Boys several times, where the police will accidentally create a police line that pushes Antifa into a Proud Boys area or a Patriot Prayer area or wherever. But it seems to be the police are in several of these cities attempting to force together rioters and civilian defenders to create the exact situation that happened that night. Wolf gave us an ice cream. Thank you so much, Wolf. I much appreciate it. I'm dreaming. Why am I dreaming, Wolfwind? Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, so then the defense picks up on cross-examination. They just clarify some basic information with Nick Smith, and that's about it. The defense then calls Joanne. Joanne's got a last name, which I know that she has picked up some minor fame in the last hour here. Let me see if I can find a picture of her, because I know that she's... There we go. Yeah, the Grambo, that's who it is. This is Joanne Grambo, which I know this is a bit of a stylized picture over here. Joanne Grambo has become a legend in the hour before I started streaming, and I would appear that in the 2 hours since I started, her fame and infamy has not decreased. So this Kyle's defense then calls Joanne Grambo, who was very offended at being asked how old she is, and more power to her. But she did respond that she's 54. She was interviewed by the FBI at one point. She said that she was bothered during the summer of 2020 by BLM killing people all summer and burning down their communities. Wow. She started an activist group for patriots. I can kind of go into the details of the group that she started, but basically it was just we're going to be out here to support people who don't want their communities burned down kind of a thing. Anybody who wants to support America, we're pro that. She brought her group down to Kenosha to help defend businesses on the third night of riots, so that would be Tuesday. Ryan Balch, who's previously testified, he is also associated with Joanne's group. They were the car that Nick had previously testified that arrived at Car Source that they hadn't met before, but offered to help defend it. So that's the car that Nick was talking about. And Nick agreed to allow them to help them, and they did. Let's see here. Joanne says that she met the owner of Car Source, Sam, who we've previously talked about. Let's see here. Sam, she said that Sam was happy to see them, that he was crying, either tears of joy at them helping him or tears of sadness at the loss of his car inventory. This, again, is consistent with what Nick testified earlier and against what Sam had testified earlier. Sam is also, again, the guy who had all of the cars. He had testified that he had something like 11 cars that he owned, that he drives on a regular basis. So, let's see here. Joanne says that Sam never told them to leave, never told them that they were trespassing. It was pretty clear that the owner wanted them there, and that the owner is only lying during his testimony because of possible liability. She was armed that night, open carrying a .380 pistol. She was stationed on the ground with Kyle that night. She said that she would periodically hold Kyle's rifle while Kyle was doing medical aid to people, which we know from other testimony that Kyle offered medical assistance to several people, several specific instances of Kyle providing medical aid. And we now know that Joanne Grambo was the person helping Kyle hold his rifle while Kyle did that sort of stuff. She was shown a picture of Rosenbaum, and she said that she recognized Rosenbaum from that night. She testified that this was... I actually might go... Let me see if I can find the video of it, because I don't know if I want to say it per se. Let's see here. But she testified that that Rosenbaum told her something, which if somebody has that in chat, please let me know. I'll just go ahead and Yeah, should I say it? I don't know. They took down Sargon for doing this, so let's see. I'll say N-word. How about that? Okay. So Grambo testifies that while she was standing next to Kyle, Rosenbaum told them that he was going to, quote, kill you motherfucking N-words and cut your hearts out. That's what Rosenbaum said to her and Kyle. It was previously testified in a different instance that Rosenbaum had also shouted at Kyle that if he found Kyle alone, he was going to kill him. And this is a different point in time, a different point in the night where Rosenbaum also says in a very colorful language that he's going to kill Kyle or people that are next to Kyle. I think that this goes a long way to, I don't know, proving the state of mind that probably Rosenbaum wanted to kill Kyle. I don't know about that. I would guess that probably goes a long way to that. She actually said the word. I think it kind of shocked the court a little bit, but it was funny. She then testified that Rosenbaum threw something that caused her a bottle of something unknown, but whatever it was caused her respiratory irritation. It made her eyes water, made it hard to breathe. The assumption implication here is that this was some kind of chemical bomb. It was testified that it was possible people were doing some kind of homemade mixture, which I'm not going to describe the chemicals in, but it's some kind of mixture that you can make with household chemicals that would create a sort of chlorine bomb in a water bottle. There was some. Anyways, she testified that Rosenbaum threw something that she didn't know what it was, but it definitely made her eyes water. She testified that Kyle tried to get back to the main car source prior to all the shootings, but the police sent him back. Again, we've known this from previous testimony and previous videos that Kyle was trying to go back to the car source at an earlier point in the night. The police told him no, and they sent him back down the street, back towards where he would inevitably meet up with Rosenbaum, and the shooting would start. So again, Kyle didn't want to shoot anybody that night. He was trying to get back to a safe location because stuff was getting kind of hot, but the police wouldn't let him get out that way. So the police made him go back, and she testifies to confirm that yes, that indeed did happen. She was at the car source when Kyle returned after all the shootings. She said she was the one who opened the door, and Kyle kind of ran into her a little bit, and that Kyle was extremely pale. He was clearly in shock. He was stammering. He was sweating, and a little bit heart-wrenching, but as we know from previous testimony, Dominic Black and Kyle were such close friends that they referred to each other as brothers, and she testified that Kyle was actually calling out for Dominic, that he wanted Dominic to be there with him, and so she actually went to go find Dominic to go back to be with Kyle. She said that Kyle said that Kyle had repeated that I had to, which I think the video evidence shows that Kyle is correct in that he did have to shoot people because they gave him no choice. So I don't think that's really damning for her to be testifying that Kyle said that. I think that's just Kyle saying things that were true, which I don't think is very damning. I think if you say true things, I don't think that counts against you in a court of law. She testified that she took Kyle's rifle when he got back, because I think either she just took it off of him. Like, it wasn't like she wrestled it from him. It was just he didn't want him on him, or she got his rifle, and the rifle stayed at the car source after Dominic took Kyle back to his home in the city next to Kenosha, where again 40 minutes later Kyle would end up turning himself in to his hometown police department within about 40 minutes of this event. The state then picks up for cross-examination of Grambo, which was so I said yesterday you should definitely watch Gage's testimony. You also need to watch Grambo's testimony. This Joanne Grambo's testimony was, wow, she's a very sturdy woman. She was not having it with the state prosecutor. She was a very hostile witness, and I think everybody loved it. I think that's why the internet in the last 3 hours has absolutely fallen in love with her. I'm sure you will too once you watch her testimony. the state right off the bat comes at her hard and says, you didn't really put out fires at the church, did you? There was previous testimony that there was fires at a church nearby where Kyle's group was, and that some members of Kyle's group went to go put out the fires. I don't know that there was any evidence that she was part of that group, or I think this was kind of the first time that we'd heard that she was even implied to be part of that group. But the state just off the jump goes, you didn't put out fires at the church, did you? And it's just not relevant to anything going on. All you're trying to do is just impugn her character for maybe not putting out a fire at a church. It's either she's if she didn't put out the fire, she's neutral. If she did put out the fire, she's good. So I don't really understand what that line of questioning was meant to achieve, but it did not. Let's see here. The state tried to accuse her of calling Kyle's mother after the fact and telling Kyle's mother to be strong. She said, yes, I did do that. And I don't, I don't understand what the state's, is that a problem? I guess the state is trying to imply to the jury that that's a problem. I don't think the jury is going to really see that as problematic. The FBI on her, we've seen this before with previous witnesses, where the state has FBI notes about an interview with one of the witnesses. So a lot of the people testifying in court this week and last week, they have previously spoken to the FBI. During their interviews, the FBI will take notes, and those notes are now available as evidence. There's a difference between a police statement and an FBI statement. When you're giving a statement to the police, typically you're either verbally giving it or you're writing it down, and you have control over what the statement is. When you're talking to the FBI, you're just talking to a person and they're jotting down notes of things that they find interesting or observations that they're making. But you don't have any control over what they're writing down and what they will ultimately put in as your statement. And so we've seen this with previous witnesses where the FBI jotted down something that was kind of a jump to conclusions type of a statement, and the defense kind of diffused it by saying, you didn't have access to the FBI's notes when they were making it. No, I didn't. You didn't have the choice to look over and confirm that everything that they wrote down was correct, did you? No, I didn't. So basically it was just diffusing that, well, the FBI's notes about an interview with somebody, they don't really hold up that well because the person having the interview didn't have a chance to look that over to confirm the accuracy of any of it. And so we had the same sort of thing with Grambo here, where now I'm thinking about it, I think Grambo's not her last name. I think that people have merged together the name Grandma and Rambo. That could be my bad for misreading Twitter fake news, but I do know that her first name's Joanne. Either way, Joanne Grambo. We'll just keep calling her Grambo. I'm sure she has a different last name now that I'm thinking about it. You just watched me come to the conclusion that Twitter is not real life in real time. I hope you all enjoyed that. Either way, the state was trying to, elicit a response out of Grambo. They said in this FBI statement, the FBI says you were helping Kyle's attorney and you were withholding evidence from us and giving special evidence to Kyle's attorney. Isn't that true? And she goes, no, none of that's true. That's not true at all. And the state keeps going through this really convoluted leading line of questioning about her trying to hide evidence. And they go through this complicated process of how she was hiding videos on her cell phone. And she's like, I barely know how to use my phone. I also wasn't taking any videos that night. So how could I be hiding them from anybody? I offered my phone to the FBI. I didn't tell them what they could and couldn't take. I just let them have it, and they took what they wanted. So if they missed something, that's their problem. That's not her problem. But that was a very fun line of questioning, and she did not want to take any shit from Binger, and she definitely shouldn't have. We confirmed that she is an out-of-towner. Again, a lot of the characters that night were out-of-towners. does it make a difference into the self-defense case? Not really. But the left likes to focus on the defense being an out-of-towner, but they don't really care that, all of the people assailing the defense were also out-of-towners. But just context, I guess. So it was previously testified that the city had decided to shut down the off-ramps for the highway next to town so that it was more difficult to get into town. You couldn't get into town through the highway. You had to go further down, find another exit, and then come into the back roads if that's how you wanted to get into town. So this has been previously testified by police and detectives in this case that they had done that. So the state, now back talking to Grambo, says, you knew they were closing off the on-ramps so that people like you couldn't come into our community. And she said, no, I didn't know that. But also, I'm watching this and is it really the state's position that the on-ramps were closed to prevent people like Grambo, people who were coming to protect businesses of the community, that it was the intention of the city to prevent those people from coming into the city? Is Grambo the people like you that Binger's talking about? Is it really their position that the purpose of closing down the highway ramps was to prevent people from coming in to defend businesses? Say, we already know that the mayor, I forget what his name is, told the police to pull back. The police did pull back, even though all of them are lying in their testimony that we were on patrol that night. Well, what were you patrolling? Nothing. So we already know that the police had forsaken the community. And then now the state is adding to that by saying, well, not only did the police forsake the community, they were also trying to prevent other civilians from coming in to pick up the slack for what the police had left behind to protect the community. If the police decide the community is an anarchy tonight, well, by golly, we're not going to let any outsiders come in to change that. We're going to make sure that they maintain their anarchy. It's just completely ridiculous position. One of the benefits of Kyle having a jury of his peers is that I think a lot of the jury understands who the good guys and who the bad guys are in this. And I don't think that the jury is going to sit there and think, oh, wow, the bad people coming in are the people that were trying to stop the businesses from being burned down. I'm sure there's at least one or two of them on the jury that probably does think that. I mean, statistically, but generally, I don't think this is going to carry much weight. Let's see here. She testified that she was carrying her .308 open carry as a deterrent. She did not intend to use it. She then testifies, which I think was probably the most, the highlight of all the testimony, was that she testified that size doesn't matter. This was big for a lot of small people. She said the state was trying to get her to say that there was a difference between an AR and a pistol, saying that the AR was much bigger. And her response was, well, the size doesn't change what it does. Essentially, size doesn't matter. They both put holes in people. I thought that was hilarious. She was she just was not having it, and the state basically yelled at her, and then she just yelled back at them, and it was fun. I noticed that the state prosecutor was much more hostile to her. So she's the second of the defense's witnesses. The state was much more hostile to her than the defense ever was to any of the state witnesses. Every time the defense cross-examined a state witness, they were professional. Binger, the state prosecutor, essentially was yelling at the defense's witness. So it just goes on to the level of professionalism. And I think that based off the durability of the arguments that Binger's bringing forth to build his case, I think that him yelling at a witness on stand, I think that points to a lack of professionalism, and the weakness of his argumentation also goes to a lack of professionalism. It seems that Binger's just not very good at his job. Let's see here. There is a character that has been referenced throughout the trial who has been referred to as Yellow Pants. Yellow Pants was a persistent agitator that night. Grambo testified that Yellow Pants had been jumping on a car in the lot at one point that night. The state says, and that's when you guys pointed a gun at him, or that's when Kyle pointed a gun at him, right? Because it's been testified earlier that the reason Yellow Pants was upset, and I believe that it was Richie McGinnis's testimony, because Richie McGinnis talked to these people. He actually talked to Yellow Pants. Yellow Pants testified that, or Yellow Pants told Richie, and Richie testified that one of the reasons that this group was upset at Kyle is because they claimed that Kyle pointed a gun at him. There was some other, I guess, allegations that Kyle had pointed a gun at this group that Yellow Pants was associated with, and the state really thought that they had Grambo here. Then they said, you saw Yellow Pants, yeah, you saw Yellow Pants jumping on the car, yeah, and that's when you guys pointed a gun at him. And then what does Grambo say? Well, yeah, but that was after he pointed a gun at us. Oh no, you're telling us that they only pointed a gun at a person after that person pointed a gun at them? Oh no. The state then asked, how did she intend to use her 308 pistol to protect the property? The judge objects immediately and reminds the jury that, quote, it is lawful to be armed while protecting property. Wow. So that kind of immediately evaporated that line of questioning, because the state was attempting to imply that it was illegal or immoral or unreasonable for her to be open carrying while defending property, and the judge says it is lawful to be armed while protecting property. She testifies again, confirming that the police pushed the crowd towards her group, away. They pushed rioters away from the courthouse and towards her group of civilians, and told them that they would have to deal with it. Binger then tried this weak line of argumentation that he's tried to set up earlier in the trial. So during previous testimonies, he's tried to make this point that after the police line pushed the rioters past the first car source and the police line went past the first car source, that the danger to car source was over, because the police line had moved forward and all the rioters would be in front of the police line, right? So there is no danger to car source anymore. And so he tries this again with her, and she immediately shuts it down and says, no, there was still a danger because the police line wasn't totally successful. There was still rioters behind the police line, so car source was still in danger. Let's see here. This is actually pretty big in testimony because, again, like I said, the state had been previously trying to characterize this police line push as a time of zero risk, that after the police line went past car source, there was zero risk the rest of the night. There's no reason for any of them to be there. They should immediately just despawn and not be there at all. She also then testified that the police line, not only was it not effective in the first push and that there were still rioters behind the police line, that the police pulled back past car source, and that other rioters that they had previously pushed forward were now back in front of car source. So the police kind of pushed the rioters forward past car source, got the rioters all agitated, then they pulled back and the rioters followed the police line back, and now all of a sudden they're in front of car source again. So this whole idea that first push by the police line, that the state prosecutors wanted to say, oh, well, that means that there's zero risk after that. She totally destroyed that entire narrative. And you can see up on the screen here, you see how happy the Kyle's defense lawyers in the background are there, and how miserable the prosecutor looks there. Well, today, as all the days have been, I wouldn't say that today was the worst day for the prosecution, but all the days were bad, and essentially every day now is just further and further grinding to dust the prosecution's case. And like I said, the prosecution started off the day, they rested their case. They aren't bringing any more witnesses. The only witnesses that we're going to hear from now are the defense's witnesses. And for some reason, the prosecutors brought a bunch of witnesses that debunked their own case. I really have higher hopes for Kyle's defense lawyers. It seems like they're doing a pretty good job so far. I would guess that if there was a witness that was even questionable, they would choose not to bring them on the stand. At this point, the case is over. The defense has almost nothing left to prove. They're really just doing this to kind of go through the motions. But essentially, the prosecution has essentially debunked their own case. The defense really doesn't need to call anybody. So I would suspect that the only people that you're going to see as witnesses for the defense now are going to be, for sure, 100% helps out Kyle in this case. Maybe the defense was planning on bringing in a witness that was maybe, 50-50 or 80-20, that maybe they would help. Maybe they would, there's a small chance that they would say something random. I would imagine that at this point, the defense would say, we're not going to risk it with these weirdos or these 50-50 ones. We're going to only bring in people we know 100% for sure what they're going to say. Whereas for some reason, the prosecution didn't have anybody to call, right? Like, there is no case or any way of proving that Kyle wasn't acting in self-defense. So that's why the prosecutions, they should have never brought the case. But the reason why their case sucks is because there is nothing for them to do. There is no argument to make. There is no evidence to present. They're just making stuff up and calling people that debunk their own case. And again, that proves that they should never have brought this to trial. They should have just dropped the charges. Let's see here. Almost done here. Yeah, we are done here. The defense picks back up with questioning Grambo, just confirms some various facts that she'd already stated. Then there's a short break, and when we come back, I only watched a little bit of it, and I'm probably going to talk about this tomorrow because the next witness, this was a little after 4 p.m. Eastern, was Nathan Devroon, and this is who I talked about at the beginning of the show. It would appear that while I took a short pause between 4 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Eastern, it would appear as though Nathan Devroon really had some hot testimony in that he accused the prosecutors of attempting to coerce his testimony prior to the trial. I'm sure we will talk all about that tomorrow. I don't know any more about it than what I just said, but that's what I was seeing on Twitter. Twitter was on fire for the 50 minutes that I wasn't watching it. But I guess we'll find out tomorrow what actually happened. But it seems like Nathan Devroon was coerced by Binger, one of the prosecutors, that Binger was trying to coerce Nathan's testimony prior to the trial. If true, that is... I don't even know what that is. I guess that would have to be a mistrial. I would imagine that is absurdly illegal. I'd imagine it's a lot of things. And the last I saw about this on Twitter was that the state prosecutors had essentially stopped trying to convict Kyle and started trying to defend themselves in court by their line of questioning to try to get Nathan Devroon to retract his statement that they were trying to coerce him. That's all I know so far. You guys might even know more than I do about it at this point. I am sure that will be absolutely fascinating, and that will be the first thing we talk about tomorrow, because tomorrow I will pick up with Devroon's testimony. We'll finish off the rest of the whoever testified tonight and whoever testifies for the first half of tomorrow for our Day 7 our Day 7 update. I thank you guys very much for watching. All sorts of things that you guys could be doing right now instead of listening to me. All kinds of other commentators you could be listening to, and I much appreciate that you chose me. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully, unless something catastrophic happens. That is my intention to be back tomorrow to review this once more. Again, you guys, what this series is trying to do is be more than a 5-minute update that a lot of other commentators are doing, and less than a watching the entire thing somewhere in between. Also, not being a lawyer, I'm giving you a lot more of a lay perspective on this, which is closer to what the jury is going to be seeing. All of the live streams and commentary by the legal YouTubers is extremely fascinating, and I do encourage you to watch some of that stuff. But what those lawyers are observing and what they're seeing in this case, I think, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I would have never thought about that. But that's the point of me doing commentary on this, is because I'm going to think of things that the jury might think of. I'm not going to think of things that a lawyer might think of, right? The lawyers aren't going to be on the jury. So the things that they're noticing and the arguments that they're making, it's likely the jury is not going to notice that or see that. Now, that's where the closing statements come in, because the defense attorneys are sure to have a wonderful narrative that they'll build for the jury and explain all of this evidence in context to them. So at that point, the jury will then have it spelled out for them. But right now, as the jury is watching it, the jury only has themselves to rely on. They only have their lay perspective, their non-legal background to rely on. And that's what I've got to rely on as I'm also watching this. So I think that's a valuable perspective, and I'm glad that you guys are continuing to watch this. Certainly the viewership seems high enough that we will continue to do this unless, again, something happens. That's been the show for tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow. It's been the 6th update for the Rittenhouse case. Let's be Trevize, Fox Trevize. That's me signing off. Good night, guys.